Hey y'all, Michael here. Welcome to Spooky Season for 2023. Before this episode gets started, I wanted to jump in and remind you we'll be at Arcane in Durham, North Carolina on Thursday, September 28th at 8 p.m. We'll record a live episode, do a Q&A, hand out swag, and hang out with folks. We hope to see you there. Also, Arcane Carolinas Volume 1 is out now, collecting Charlie's research, notes, and reflections from a bunch of stories we've covered over time. There's a link in the show notes to this episode, so check it out. And now, on with the show.
You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Michael here. This recording was made at Ret-Con 2023 in front of a large and enthusiastic audience. Ret-Con was a ton of fun, and it was such an honor to be a part of their inaugural convention. I want to preface this episode by thanking them for letting us be there and for making us feel so welcome. This con was the kind of experience that you only get at a fan-run convention, being put on by people who simply love what they love. A quick note about the audio for this episode. Due to environmental factors beyond anyone's control, our microphones picked up a lot of what I think of as table noise, shuffling papers, our hands brushing the tablecloth, us bumping against the surface as we move around, things like that. As such, I've had to do some pretty strict editing. You'll be able to hear the audience at the beginning and at the very end and here and there throughout, but otherwise I've had to remove most audience and environmental sound. I mention this only so that you don't wonder why sometimes you can hear that we were in a big room with people in it and people outside of it, and at others it sounds like Charlie and I are sitting alone in a recording booth. I don't know how many people notice the technical minutia like that, but I do because I'm a stickler for it, so I think it's worth bringing up. This episode was so much fun to record, and if you're ever curious to hear an outtake or two from things like this, you can always check us out on Patreon. Now, take a seat in the theater of the mind and join our live recording in progress at Ret-Con 2023 in Cary, North Carolina. And thanks for listening. Are we recording it?
No, we weren't. We should do that again.
Okay, so now we're recording?
Yeah, so now we're recording.
Okay.
And I'm your co-host, Charlie Newshaw.
And I'm your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist, Michael G. Williams.
Thank you.
And
I need to give a disclaimer. The convention disclaimer. We have to say this. I've never read any of his books, and I'm not gonna, so don't ask me which ones to buy.
We do.
Cover the colors on the pages in.
Yeah, you know, I said to somebody yesterday, I write in crayon with my foot. I'm like,
I never learned to read.
I'm like kindergarten Christy Dowling, which is a really deep cut literary joke.
Yeah, I don't get
I'm
that
sorry.
All right, we are ready. I've been waiting for this all day. We have done some interesting panels, but now we get to do original recipe Arcane Carolinas. Thank you very much for being here. Got to find my notes. Dan Aykroyd, no.
And also to clarify, and as an explanatory note while he looks through his notes, our system is that one of us drives and the other has no idea what we're going to talk about. And Charlie is driving, so I have no idea what we're going to talk about. I am just here to learn with you. We are in this together, friends.
We are good to go.
Also, for
Intro.
People, for just one second.
I'm just reading it.
For people who are listening to this later, much later, we are currently at Ret-Con 2023, Ret-Con 1.
Very first one. Haywood County, North Carolina. This is Western North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in your stomping ground. I figure you'll have some things to say.
I grew up in Henderson County, thank you, not Haywood.
Well, I know, but it's your neighbors.
I don't have anything against Haywood County. I just felt like randomly being hostile to them.
Well, I'll have you know that as of the 2020 census, the population has grown to 62,089 people.
Okay.
Originally part of the indigenous territory considered Cherokee land, the county was formed in 1808, so kind of early for some of those western counties.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's like one of the first ones carved out of the original, quote, Buncombe County, which was basically everything west of Charlotte.
I am the one doing this episode.
Oh, sorry.
but he is spot on correct.
My color commentary was too well informed.
No, it's great. I love it. See, that's why I knew, like, as soon as I started on this one, I was like, Michael's going to have so much to say. But no, that's exactly it. And it was named after John Haywood, who was the North Carolina State Treasurer from 1787 to 1827.
I love history stuff that comes from a time when there just wasn't anybody to name stuff after, so
Right.
they're just like him.
Well, that's how it feels, because so many of these stories, we always open up our stories with, like, this is where it was, this is the history of where it was, this is why it's named that. This is the most vanilla one I think we've ever had. He was the treasurer. Like, okay.
I mean, pretty important, given
First
things.
person to own a tabby cat. You know what I mean? Like, okay, that's slightly different, but you get my point.
But yeah,
Usually
yeah.
it's like Revolutionary War hero,
Yeah.
like Duke of Rumblebumbleshire in England, whatever.
Yeah, he might have been those things also.
He could have. Anyway, so in 1828, the western part of Haywood County became Macon County.
Okay.
So they lopped off a big chunk from Buncombe,
Yeah.
then lopped off a chunk to make the next county over, Macon. And in 1851, parts of Haywood and Macon were combined to form Jackson County, so they lost even more. So it used to be a lot bigger than it was.
Okay.
So it shrunk. Notable things from Haywood County: the last shot of the Civil War east of the Mississippi was fired in Haywood County in Waynesville.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's kind of like narrowing it down. Last shot this many miles in the direction of, on a Tuesday, after 11 a.m., before 3 p.m.
I have a lot of relatives in Waynesville. That's the thing I'm going to say in response to that, because otherwise I'll piss off everybody who lives in Waynesville.
Well, they're all your relatives, right?
And they are all my relatives. Oh, yeah, so I don't care, actually.
So it's also home to a cool old house turned hotel turned restaurant called the Imperial Hotel / Southern Porch.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like a cool place. And also a brewery named after the tale that we are going to cover today, the Boojum. The Boojum Brewing Company. By show of hands, who knows about the Boojum? My God.
Note that I did not put my hand up.
So we got two Boojum fans. So the Boojum is a regionally, not even regionally, locally reported cryptid, having been reported to be seen in Haywood County, North Carolina, most predominantly around the turn of the 20th century.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's described as a male creature, specifically. About, they must have looked under its drawers or something, I don't know. About 8 feet tall, a mixture of human and beast with thick gray hair and a human-like face.
That sounds awfully familiar.
I say human-like, but not so human that it's easy to look at.
Oh.
And that comes into to play later.
All right.
Some accounts also have him having a tail, like a proper, appendagey tail, not like a little, nub.
I'm just going to say that soup to nuts, from Waynesville to has a little tail, you're still talking about my relatives.
Without naming names, I knew somebody that had a tail. So it does happen.
Yeah,
but,
it does
but,
happen.
But those are nubs. They're not this is terrible radio.
Like this is how it balances when it walks, kind of tail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, that's my gesture for tail, if you're wondering. I don't know. That was awful. I don't know.
It's multi-purpose. It's
I'm not going to stand up and do it.
It's multi-purpose. It's elephants. It's tails.
It's whatever you need it to be.
Yeah.
One book said half bear, half man, which is just Zangief from Street Fighter. So I'm kind of like, I don't really buy that one.
Having spent never mind.
Yeah, see, I knew you were going to have something to say there.
I was.
I was.
Yeah. Okay, but is it? Well, no. Keep going.
He was most often seen in the distance, never up close, on Rocky Mountain cliffs or on outcroppings during dusk. He could be heard more than seen, moaning, with occasional songs and guttural sounds or whining noises near hiking trails.
I feel like there's an obvious, is this an instance of a very specific thing?
Oh, yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. No, we're going on a journey tonight. I got 6 or 7 pages here.
I just also like the whole scene on a rocky outcropping at dusk. That's very ambient.
Yeah, it is. I'm pretty sure I've seen that Sasquatch movie.
One might even call it romantic.
If only we could get close enough to smell his musk.
We know some people who could write that really well.
Right.
So
I want a word count on musk in the. I don't know if this episode's going to make the feed.
it will. It'll just be 4 minutes long.
What are all these jokes they're making?
I'll think about it in here after us.
Yeah. All right. So the Boojum is alleged to be a collector of gems and precious stones found throughout the western part of the state. Western North Carolina is known for precious gems. He particularly fancied rubies. And would dig for them and hoard them the way a bird would hoard shiny objects in its nest. He would stash them in caves.
Okay.
I see. I can see where this is. I know you're getting it. Is the thing where I'm headed with this? We may have been doing this for too long. You may be putting the pieces together before I get there. The caves in his lairs would help hide his hoards, but he was also said to have a unique way of hiding the gems by placing them into receptacles filled with liquid.
Receptacles filled with liquid.
Stone receptacles, like stone jugs, essentially. Filled with liquid.
Oh.
Naturally fermented liquid.
So, like, natural moonshine?
Like, okay, so there's this thing called Applejack. By show of hands, who knows what Applejack is?
You got some?
I don't. But, So
he'd drop his rubies in hard cider?
Like, he would, basically. In, like, bowls and, like, stone crafted things.
So you go collect a bunch of apples.
Ferment them.
And gems. Mm-hmm. And ferment the apples. Mm-hmm. And then, like, strain them out, stand over them, sweat over the fermentation process.
He's part man, part beast.
He's a clever.
He has
Boojum.
opposable thumbs.
Okay.
It's all happening.
And then when it was all done, he'd be like, "Oh yes, this is suitable for the depositing of my rubies."
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So the legend is he would do this because he knew that even if somebody found his lair, they wouldn't pour it out because they'd smell it, see what it was, drink it, and pass out. I love everything about that. Yeah, and upon awakening, the Boojum would have come and taken everything. Yeah. And they'd just wake up hungover.
Plus, what a fun little way to guard your stash. Hey, kids, you don't want to go in that cave. That's where the Boojum keeps his rubies. You should definitely ignore any interesting smells that you encounter as you walk past it. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's where it gets kind of wacky and definitely becomes a story of its time. I do not condone the activities of the Boojum. The Boojum liked the ladies. I cannot wait. The human ladies.
Oh.
The Boojum liked human ladies. And in the early 1900s, it was not uncommon for women to bathe in a spring or in a stream or something like that, where they could get what I believe is locally referred to as privacy.
Privacy. Also, this was a time of when it was very popular for hot springs and healing springs to be something that people sought out in mountains.
So it was during these times when bathers thought they were having some private time that the Boojum was poking his human-like face out from behind the bushes and peep at them.
Yeah.
Never mean any harm. He would never attack anybody, but he just kind of grunted at them.
Oh, God.
And then they get scared and run home or to this one hotel that was in the area where a lot of the stories originated. They'd be like, "Oh, you need to go bathe in the springs," and they'd go, and then the Boojum saw me. And of course, then many I'm picturing Gaston from Beauty and the Beast would puff out their chests and go, "We're going Boojum hunting," and then they'd run around in the woods and make a big fuss and come home with nothing.
It feels like maybe this hotel was just covering for a real creeper who worked there. Just let's not get sued.
There's so many layers to this.
Also, I want to note that Manly Wade-Wellman, who is one of the best writers of North Carolina's history, and there's an award named in his honor that I've won, actually. But I am nowhere as good as Manly Wade-Wellman was. But he wrote, one of his things was Cosmic Horror, but he also wrote a series of short stories and novellas about this character named Silver John, whose entire deal was that he had a guitar with silver strings, and he could use that silver-stringed guitar to fight monsters and evil by playing songs at them.
By playing sweet jams.
Yeah, pretty much. That was his whole deal. And they're really great stories.
He'd be like, "This next bop slaps."
There was one of them about a woman taking a bath in a hot spring in the mountains and a monster creeping on her from the bushes.
Seriously?
I don't remember if it's called called a Boojum in that story, but there is a story he wrote that is about exactly that circumstance.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, Silver John basically has to teach him manners, if I remember correctly.
The Boojum in the story does not learn manners from Silver John.
Oh, okay.
Because the next part of the story gets even wackier. According to the foremost Boojum experts on the internet, a local girl, mostly named Annie, though in one version named Maggie,
Okay.
did not run when she saw the Boojum and was like, "What's up, Boojum?" She was like, "I'm not afraid of this thing. You know, I've heard all the stories. He doesn't mean any harm." And she approached the Boojum, and they fell in love.
Oh, but I love this.
And Annie left her family and friends to live with the Boojum in the woods.
In like full Lucille Bluth, I say, good for her.
She leaves. Her and the Boojum are living their best life in the caves. Here's the problem.
Uh-huh.
The Boojum, like I said, he's half man, but he's also half beast.
Okay.
Right? And the beast has to beast. He needs those rubies. He needs those gems. He's got a compulsion. And he continues to leave the cave for extended periods of time because he's got to get those gems.
Okay.
He can't put down the hustle.
Could he just not like move into the place where the gems already are? I feel like that would be very doable.
That's not very Boojum of you.
Okay.
Boojum's got a Boojum, man.
All right. Yeah, okay.
So he goes out and he continues wandering, and Annie would be stricken with loneliness, and to communicate would, go to the top of a ridge and just start hooting and hollering and howling and making Boojum noises to get him to respond.
Right.
And that was like ringing the dinner bell to come home.
Okay.
So this was like a known thing. And if you heard that, oh yeah, I was just Annie.
How good at this was she? Like, could you easily distinguish her from regular Boojum?
I mean, the Boojum understood.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
There's not a lot. There's no audio clips of her. It was 1900 whatever.
It's entirely possible that about 3 days after this is published that there will be. I don't know.
You are about to complete a formal study in Appalachian Studies, right?
Yes.
Yes. So have you ever heard of John Paris?
No.
Okay, so John Paris was a pretty prolific writer, folklore specifically, and he wrote a whole bunch of mountain folklore books in the same way that Charles Whidbey wrote a whole bunch of beach folklore books.
Yeah.
Like, basically, he owned the mountains, Whidbey owned the sea.
Right.
Right. He was also a writer for the Asheville Citizen.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Kind of famous, I guess, in his day.
Sure.
And he wrote that the back and forth hollering between the Boojum and Annie was heard so often by guests at that Eagle's Nest Hotel that he attributes the source of the word hootenanny to
Oh my God.
hooting Annie.
So I don't buy that for a second, but I love it, and I think it's really sweet.
Well, there's a lot of people that do buy that, and they repeat it all over the internet.
Oh, is this one of those stories that gets pasted everywhere?
And in books.
Oh.
It's everywhere.
A brief digression,
Sure.
if I can. My ancestors farmed large quantities of land in the mountains, and some of it was in valleys, and some of it was on the sides of ridges. Mm-hmm. And they developed a system of calls and hollers and would do things like call each other in for lunch by going out on the ridge and issuing a sequence of sounds. Yeah, and there were like sets of responses, and it wasn't exactly a language, but it was definitely a system of signaling. Yeah. And there were, pretty complex ideas that could be expressed via this.
We had a network of bells where I grew
Really?
up. Yeah, we had a network of bells. So my mom had a bell on the back, and she would ding, 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 ding. And then, mom at the end of the block would ding, 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 and so on and so forth. And it would carry on. And eventually you'd hear a bell and be like, I guess we all got to go back. And the whole little tribe of kids would make their way back and be like, who rang? And it'd be like, next house.
By the time of my childhood, we didn't do the hollering from the ridge anymore, but we did have an air raid siren in my not town. And my take as a child, because I was a sarcastic jerk, was by the time the Soviets decide to bomb us, it's over for everybody. Like, there is no point in telling us that this is happening.
Yeah, that's way, way darker than my mom ringing a bell to come call us home for lunch.
Yeah. When I was a kid, they would periodically test the air raid siren down at the post office. But you could hear it all over.
That's not the same. That's not what we're talking about at all. That's horrible.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, Boojum.
Yeah, so Boojum. Let's get back to Boojum. Let's deconstruct the legend.
Yeah.
As we do. Given the history of wild man sightings in Western North Carolina, my first take this is like spawned from Bigfoot legends.
Yeah, exactly. This
Right?
has got to be Bigfoot.
We've talked about this in archival episodes of Arcane Carolinas. Be sure to check out our feed on iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Apple Podcast.
Or anywhere else.
So I just thought it was just a spin on one of those, but then there's a lot more that goes into play. And you're going to get into this because it gets into linguistics, right? So I was like, let me walk this back to where does the word Boojum come from?
Yeah, that's something, because the only context I've ever heard Boojum in before is not as a thing, but as sort of like, in the same way that like somebody would say ghosts and goblins to encompass like everything.
Yep.
I could imagine somebody saying Boojums to encompass everything. That's sort of how I heard.
Yeah. And it first appeared in print in 1876 in the Lewis Carroll poem, The Hunting of the Snark, as a dangerous creature. And Lewis Carroll, historically speaking, is a somewhat problematic individual when it comes to young ladies. So making the use of the word Boojum as a romantic interest of a bathing young lady is not the best look.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yowza.
Yeah.
That's an oof.
Yeah, it's a big oof, right? So I'm like, all right, so Lewis Carroll invented this as a made-up word for this poem, right? How would a rural post-war town come to adopt the name of a creature from an English poet's nonsense story?
I mean, they got books too.
Yeah, sure, right, but like, it's for me. I'm like, how did it get there? Right?
I don't know.
So around the same time the Boojum stories are widely accepted to have originated, there was a massive boom in industry and tourism. There was a big influx, including Peter Thompson of Canton, North Carolina, and Reuben Robertson, owners of the Champion Paper and Fiber Company.
Oh, God, yeah, Champion Paper, geez.
Yep. So these are the people that started it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, these are people who like built a career out of poisoning the people that worked for them.
Yep. They're the same company that in 1931 sold 90,000 acres of land to the government to create the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Yeah.
That's sort of, they're like, hey, it's not all bad.
That's their Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah. So these two are widely credited with proliferating the Boojum tale.
Really?
Yeah. And so is a man named S.C. Satterwhite, who in 1900 opened the Eagle's Nest Hotel in Waynesville.
Okay.
The same hotel that appears in almost all the stories. So you have titans of local industry, and I don't use that term loosely. Like, these are legitimate titans of industry, regional industry. Yeah. And the proprietor of the premier upscale hotel in the area. They're all credited as Boojum experts. So why?
Yes.
So Craig Paste from NorthCarolinaGhosts.com.
Oh, he's so cool.
He's really cool. He did an interview with the Asheville Laurel, and he came to the conclusion that it's all bunk, and said that he believes that when tourism was being boosted, the people kind of at the top of the local community had a tight circle, and they were really pushing that regional hillbilly identity as like a construct for popular culture. This identity, says, this is a direct quote from Paste, rooted itself in the idea that mountaineers were of Anglo-Saxon stock, characterized by pride, self-sufficiency, and poverty, but that's a pretty reductive take.
Needless to say, I am in the fourth semester of a 4-semester-long program that is essentially, when you hear that as the description of Appalachia, here are all the people it's leaving out. It's like everybody.
Yeah. And that's my point. So these people had a vested interest in, like, they were pushing something for the tourism industry. Yep. Paste goes on to say, and this is from that same article, it erases the history of early industrialization, the complexity and multi-ethnic settlement of the Appalachians, the centuries of interaction with and ultimate expulsion of Native Americans, and the long, rich African-American tradition in the area. Hillbillies as proud but poor pre-industrial innocence is a cultural and commercial construct, and one that was selling very well at this time. So, the Boojum is a business tactic.
Yeah.
It's a patchwork of folklore for the guests of the hotels that they could experience during cocktail hour from the comfort of the lounge.
So it was basically the ghost tour of this hotel.
Yes.
Now I kind of love it again.
And it's it is good storytelling.
Yeah.
Pace, I'll use his exact words because I think he's spot on. It's mysterious. It's a safe creature at its center. And there's the possibility of discovering riches while hiking and even a hint of romance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all there. It's a total package.
Oh my God.
The very unfortunate lineage on its name.
Yeah.
Which they probably didn't know that at the time. Anyway, I really do think, though, that there's more to it than that. I do think that the patchwork part is the more interesting part. I think that it probably has its roots in the kinds of stories that, as you alluded to, that parents will tell their kids, like, hey, kids, don't go there for a reason. And that reason being moonshiners. If you find it, don't drink it.
As a child growing up in the 70s, my grandmother had to teach me how to recognize the smoke from my cousin's stills so that I would not walk up on them, as she put it, walk up on them and get shot.
Yeah. And even if you found a stash, don't get into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Leave it alone.
You know, the wild man's going to get you. This
Right.
and that, whatever. Like
Back
all these,
away
there's
slowly.
multiple layers. There's the wild man's going to get you if you go out there. If you find the wild man's lair, don't touch the liquid that's in there. Like there's so many layers to it that work that I think the patchwork of what went into it is far more interesting than the story itself. And the name Boojum gets tacked on along with other elements like Annie, and maybe it is based on local knowledge of a Sasquatch in the area.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, oh, we saw this thing in the woods this one time, and, that gets factored in as well. So it mashes all this stuff together.
There were still pretty vast swaths of Appalachia that were not exactly unexplored or uninhabited, but were uncommon knowledge.
Unaccessible.
Yeah, and like people didn't know a lot about them. And the late 19th century, there was a lot of like color writing is what it was called, where they like essentially manufactured stories of feudists and feuding families and things like that, and really like used that to ramp up a fictional version of Appalachia.
Well, they were selling it.
And yeah, totally. And like this is a way to ramp up a different fictional Appalachia that combats it.
Regardless of however it came together, right? The Boojum story came together. It wasn't actually put into print until the 50s.
Really?
Yeah, it was all word of mouth until the 50s. And I think that has a lot to do with why it's relatively unknown.
Yeah.
Was again reprinted in 1988, repeated by Janet Barnett and Randy Russell in Mountain Ghost Stories and Curious Tales of Western NC.
Oh, that's a great book.
It is a great book.
It's a lot of fun.
I found it at a flea market.
Yeah. Nice.
It doesn't have the dust cover, but I got the book.
Yeah.
And it is posted all over the web to the point where it has inspired some pretty interesting Boojum stuff.
Yeah.
You want to hear about my Boojum stuff?
Yes.
We're not talking about the stuff you're chuckling about. We're not talking about tales about Musk. So there's Boojum Brewing Company, which is a brewery, There's Boojum songs.
Really?
There's Boojum bops. Canton native Richard Hurley recorded Legend of the Boojum, a 4-minute and 17-second jam, we'll call it, that tells the story of the Boojum, and his recordings are available on his website.
Do you know what genre of music that is?
It's like folk music.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very well produced. I listened to
sure.
it. I was like, so I found out that this was a thing, and I was like, this is gonna suck. And I clicked on it and was just like, oh, this is really well produced.
Hey, look at that.
So that's why I was like, I'm going to include that. If it was just some garbage, I wouldn't have mentioned it. But it's actually really well produced. The guy put a lot of effort into it. It sounds
That's
pretty
awesome.
good. Yeah. There's a Boojum comic.
Really?
Yeah, there's a Boojum comic. It's like 3 pages long. It's again really well produced. It's on NorthCarolinaGhost.com.
Oh, fabulous. Okay.
Yeah. So everything tracks, right? We know where the word came from. We can kind of piece together the origins of most of the story. It's like a cautionary tale, like snipe hunt type thing. Also, don't drink moonshine you find. Stay away from stills. But that does leave the Hootenanny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think they oversold it with the Hootenanny thing.
It's a bridge too far.
Right. You could have almost gotten away with it. Yeah, if it wasn't for your meddling kids. But that extra embroidery is just a bit too far. So, again, there are different versions where sometimes the name isn't even Annie. Sometimes it's Maggie.
Yeah, but Huda Maggie doesn't have the same ring
Huda
to
Maggie.
it.
We're going to get to that, too.
Okay.
Oh, buddy, we got 4 more pages of notes.
All right. Sorry, I'm like talking a lot.
No, I love it. That's what as soon as I found this, I was like, oh, Michael's going to have comments. I'm stealing this. So that's why I took it out of the pile. So we have a bucket of ideas and we claim them. We go through and we're like, I'll do this one, you'll do that one, whatever. And the other doesn't do any research. And once I like scratched the surfaces of this, I was like, mine.
I never even saw it in the list.
Yeah. Because I deleted it. Because I wanted it. It is pure marketing and embroidery. Writer Ben Zimmer does a deep dive on the word as a part of his series exploring the unique ways in which the English language has developed.
Okay.
Specifically, like American English.
Yeah.
He found that author Richard T. Wiley wrote a book in 1906 called Sim Green, A Narrative of the Whiskey Insurrection, which is a very long title, in which the title character Sim Green uses the word hootenanny the same way you would use like thingamabob or like, whatchamajig, like that. Yeah. The exact line is, that hootenanny she shovels her bread with. He's trying to, like an oven peel that you would use to pull bread out.
Yeah.
So
that's really funny. Shovels her bread with. I love it.
The book doesn't seem that interesting, but that's the first place it appears.
Well, if that's the best joke in it, then joke's on him. We got it for free.
Yep. Other early uses referred to automobile parts.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a 1910 ad for a car that promises you won't have to worry when the kabadney drops out of the hootenanny.
That speaks to my understanding of cars.
And specifically, broken down cars were sometimes called hootenannies as early as 1911. It's like jalopy. It's like, a synonym for jalopy, an early synonym. Hootenanny's origins were examined in 1963 by folklorist Peter Tammany. He noted that various meanings given to the word in rural America, it often meant an impromptu party, particularly in the Midwest. One Midwesterner, Terry Pettis of Terre Haute, Indiana, is marked as a key figure in the development and like the bringing the term to the forefront of pop culture. He moved to Seattle and he became a newspaper editor in July of 1940. And the newspaper he edited was called the Washington New Dealer, and it sponsored an event, and he wanted it to have a fun name. It was like a fundraising event. And the newspaper ad ran, New Dealer's Midsummer Hootenanny. You might even be surprised. Dancing, refreshments, door prizes, uncertainty.
Yeah, see, like uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
I love it. All of a sudden, it's like David Lynch was throwing the party.
Right. The uncertainty of a hootenanny was surprise guest performers.
Oh.
Yeah. And a year later, they had the second annual Hootenanny in Seattle in 1941. And they had two very special guests. Two buskers, one Woody Guthrie and one Pete Seeger.
No way.
Yep. They were traveling through the Pacific Northwest on a tour. The event was a big success, and Guthrie and Seeger brought word back with them to New York City about the term Hootenanny.
Yeah, because like I'd only ever heard the word as like a hoedown.
I mean, there was a TV show.
Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe it was a radio. So Pete Seeger, as quoted in Hard Travel and the Life and Legacy of Woody Guthrie, Seeger confirms the story when he talks about how they began calling their parties and shows in New York hootenannies. He said, Woody and I took the word hootenanny back to New York with us from Seattle. So somebody was like, where'd it come from? He's like, oh yeah, we stole it from them.
Very specific attribution.
Yeah. Woody Guthrie, however, in 1946 was full of crap and told Time magazine, this is a direct quote, we was playing for the Lumber Workers Union. We was singing around in the shingle mills. There was a lady out west out there in the lumber camp, and her name was Annie. And so every time they'd have a song fest, Annie would outshout all of them. So people got to call her Hootin' Annie. But the name got spread all over and out there, so we're going to have a shindig. We're going to call it a Hootenanny.
Wow. Okay.
And in 1946 is before John Paris first wrote about the Boojum, where he tacked on that version and attributed it to North Carolina.
Wow. Huh. I guess he just thought, well, nobody's ever going to read that interview again.
Right.
That's like 6 years old. And the future will never know that I stole that story whole cloth.
Yep.
This is why you have to be very careful about from whom you plagiarize.
I'm going to give credits on all this research.
That was not a comment.
All right. So you'll also find claims that it's a Scottish word, which if you say it with a thick Scottish accent, you're like, oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, those are crap, too.
I feel like that feeds into the myth that Appalachia is uniquely English and Scottish.
He hasn't seen my notes.
Let me get it where I can read it. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Look at that.
Any claims that it was originally a Scottish word tie back to the myth-making about mountain folk.
Thank you, Appalachian State University.
And to clarify, I did look it up. It doesn't appear in any Scottish dictionaries or anything similar to it if I butcher the spelling.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. The Boojum and its legend are a direct result of the commercialization of the wild man Sasquatch legend and not based on any actual real sightings or lore.
So, but let's imagine for a moment.
Oh, I've got 2 more pages, but let's imagine for a moment.
No, keep going. No, keep going.
Now we travel to Wilkes County, North Carolina.
Okay.
Early inhabitants of the area included the Tutelo and Cherokee tribes, and the county was formed from parts of Surry County and the Washington District, which is now Washington County, Tennessee.
Okay.
In either 1777 or 1776, there are conflicting reports.
I wonder what they put on their monuments.
Who knows? Notably, this was the moonshine capital of the world, a title allegedly given back in the 50s by revenue agents.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they know what they're talking about.
As a leading producer of illegal liquor. All right. And interestingly, that tradition carries on today. There was a bust in 2021 where one distiller made the news when his barn got raided, and he had produced 9,000 gallons of moonshine.
Wow. Okay. I got to say, game respects game. That is intense.
There are busts that make the news as recently as November 2022. So historically, Wilkes County distillers ran liquor far and wide. And it's widely recognized as one of the birthplaces of stock car racing.
Okay, yeah, that's very believable.
Yes. So anyway, the legend out of Wilkes County, the Wolfenannie.
The Wolfenannie.
This is something that we got asked to talk about like within a week of starting Arcane Carolinas 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Somebody was like, you need to talk about the Wolfenannie. I'm like, what is the Wolfenannie? Well, it turns out it's very similar to the Boojum.
No way.
Yeah. It's a mysterious beast. It roams the forests and fields looking for easy prey. It's believed to nest near streams, in riverbeds, sources of water.
Yeah.
Right. And on account of flooding, rain drives it to roam.
Okay.
It's also said to smell really, really bad. And it's supposed to be so mean that Sasquatches won't mess with it.
I'm still getting pretty big Sasquatch vibes off of this.
Well, reportedly, back in the 50s, some hunters shot and killed a strange-looking, oversized canine.
Okay.
And they said, this is the Wolfenannie. And they tried to skin it to save the hide, to show, like, look at this thing we got. And it smelled so bad, they got sick and stayed sick for a week. So they tried to use a backhoe to bury it, and the backhoe bucket stunk, like, perpetually from then on.
I'm just going to say, again, moonshine capital of the world. So sick for a week does not necessarily require a cryptid. And with that much moonshine, you can make anything smell like moonshine again.
It allegedly will not come near fire, so campers are encouraged to keep a roaring fire so that they know where they are.
Yeah, right.
One commenter on the internet believes that they saw one as recently as 2017 describing an unusually large, quote, demon dog in the tree line staring at them while they fed their chickens, and then it disappeared in the shadows.
Huh.
All of this is word of mouth. That is not what I meant to do. For the recording, I just threw a paper.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All of it is word of mouth. The Wolfenannie, from what I can tell, does not appear in print anywhere. It is all over forums and message boards on Wilkes, or GoWilkes.com. But it's like residents of Wilkes County just keep swapping Wolfenannie stories. Right? And and on there you can hear the origins of the story, because there will be a comment where somebody will be like, it's the Wolfenannie, and somebody will be like, what's the Wolfenannie? And then it all comes back to people being like, my aunt told me this, my uncle told me that, I was alive in the 50s and 60s, this is what the story was. And some people have claimed to smell it while camping. A rotten musk. Yeah, it's always just described as a large, nasty, smelly, wolf-like creature.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, it just screams Bigfoot to me.
Dude, it has so much in common, though, with, like, the Boojum stuff, right?
Totally. And it's just the other side of the mountain.
Yeah.
That's all.
And it's got the nanny.
That's all.
The mega nanny.
That almost makes me feel like that's I don't want to say independent verification, but earlier today we were talking about, like, what does it take for each of us to believe in something, and one of my conditions is multiple versions of the same story coming from different people, different places, etc., but places that are near enough each other, that works.
So yeah, I'm with you. I'm guessing it's probably like Sasquatch type stuff that has since been rolled into other bits of folklore and becomes this separate thing. But yeah, ultimately I think it's the stories are getting repeated to keep people from coming up on stills.
Yeah. So though, imagine, if you will,
I'm imagining
that you are some rich person in the 1920s, and you have made your way to Asheville, via one means or another. And there you get aboard your like the rickety jalopy that has been rented on your behalf. The origin of the word jalopy, by the way, is genuinely fascinating, but I will not go into it because it is a different show. But you've been loaded and your steamer trunks and everything have been like loaded into an old jalopy. And you spend, at the time, probably 2 hours going up and down dirt track switchbacks to get from Asheville to Canton. And then you arrive in Canton and you're staying in this palatial hotel in Canton, which at the time is in the middle of virtually untouched forest that nobody can point at and say they know terribly well. And you hear this story of the exotic creature that lives just back there. And if you are there for the springs, and the odds are very high that you are, be careful while you're in the springs or the Boojum will watch you. That is an exceptionally magnificent moment of adventure. And I love, not that they like abused it for their own marketing purposes or whatever, I don't care. I love that they created that experience for the people who went.
Sure. Like you said, it's the ghost tour of 1908.
Yeah. And unique to that place.
The Boojum tour.
The Boojum tour. The Boojum tour is pretty short. It probably consists of the bellhop being like, here's a story, and also I would like my tip.
Right.
But, you know, I feel like that's really fascinating.
So anyway, that's it. That's the story of the Boojum. So if you see Boojum Brewing Company beers or hear Boojum bops on the internet, that's where it comes from. But yeah, so that's it for the first segment of this big block of Arcane Carolinas. We're going to take 5 minutes, I guess. Yeah, so we'll be back at 9 o'clock with Tally Johnson, and we're going to talk about ghosts and spooky stuff.
Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com, and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.
There it is. So one printed out itty bitty words. And I forgot my glasses, so I had to reprint it in much bigger words. But we're good now. It's great, but you don't want to explain that to a 6-year-old.
Sure.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know.
My life would have been easier if somebody had.